Hello, it's Eason, and welcome to Metal Monday, where I talk about albums new and old that I recommend you listen to so you can start your week off right. Now in partnership with Templars magazine at templars.com, home to the most awesome bunch of metalheads that you are ever going to meet anywhere. Link in the description down below, please give them a visit. Like many other genres that have been around for as long, rock and metal do have their own traditions, one of which being Gene Simmons coming out every year, presumably when he sees a little bit of a dip in profits, something that he will not stand for, and swearing up and down that rock is dead, a sentiment with which I disagree completely. Rock and metal do have their share of problems. They are a little bit beat up, but they are still alive and for the most part well. Proving this point is the latest release of a Swedish crust band that has been kicking dust and dirt in your eyes since the 90s. An album that when it first came out I slept on, mainly because I just wasn't in the mood for it, but then recently checked it out and found it incredible. So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, and everyone in between and everyone outside, this is Wolfbrigade, The Enemy Reality. I've been experiencing a bit of a crust kick lately, and I haven't paid crust much mind over the years. My first brush with the genre was with Wolfbrigade back in 2017 with their then new album Run with the Hunted, and although I love that album's violent energy, its crushing heaviness to down-tuned guitars or rolling D beats, it was a little bit one note, and I didn't pay the genre much mind branching out from that as a result. Well, recently I have had a chance to take a fresh look at the genre, and I found much to love, especially with blackened crust. So naturally I decided to go back to the first band that made my introduction to it and check out what they had offered after that particular album. Boy, am I glad that I did, because The Enemy Reality turned out to be one of the funnest, most entertaining, most vibrant, most energetic, most engaging albums that I've heard recently, and I felt ashamed that I had slept on it for so long. So to rectify the mistake, let's get a little bit more into this record to see what it's all about. The path charted by Wolfbrigade and The Enemy Reality kind of looks like the band is trying to arrive at a mansion shared by speed metal, its disgruntled parent genre rock and roll, and its lover thrash metal through a pathway of crust. And if that is too abstract, let me explain. The guitars on this album take their cues as often from speed metal, rock and roll, and thrash metal as they do from crust punk and hardcore punk. The resulting sound still retains some of that nastiness and crushing heaviness of crust, but is a little bit leaner, is a little bit more agile, a little less bogged down by the bulk of muscle that the band injects into every single song. Backing up the guitars and adding more to the dirt factor is the bass, better mixed this time, sort of plodding away in the background, filling up that low end. And adding to that is the drums, taking the Ringo Starr, Mickey D type of approach. Are they relatively basic? Yes, but are they highly striking, very effective, and extremely fitting with the music? Definitely yes. And all of this is laid under the characteristic vocals, the gravelly, throaty shouts that delivers to you extremely fun and extremely memorable, highly sing-along worthy lyrics start to finish. In case that description hasn't clued you in, let me put it simply. This thing is full of straight bangers start to finish. However, even an album made like that can get boring and one note if every single one of those bangers are always banging on the same goddamn war drum. Something, luckily, that Wolfbrigade manages to avoid by differing the amounts in which the outsider genres I've mentioned before are embedded into the crust punk foundations of their music, resulting in a track list that manages to keep itself dynamic, engaging, and interesting throughout. Predictably, handling different genres within the same track or the track list of the same album requires a very delicate balancing act, something that Wolfbrigade demonstrates they are able to do right at the start of the album with the opening track Sum of All Vices. This song kicks off with a rollicking crust riff matched with rolling D beats and barked vocals with all the urgency and expediency you would expect from the genre. However, when it hits the bridge, it seamlessly transitions first into thrash, then evolves into a more rock and roll type section before going back to the thrash and then going right back to the crust, mingling all these influences in one standard length track. It even has an end of the album counterpart in the form of the penultimate track Human Beast that carries more or less the same amount of these influences within it, only it also features a little bit more black metal in its blood. There's also the wonderfully fun The Wolfman, marked with its hook lyric, "I am the Wolfman, I bear the scars of nuclear war," that leans a little bit more heavily to the rock and roll side of things, but manages to cut it with middling thrash influences, and even though it leans more heavily to one side, it is still more or less a meeting point of these two genres. But apart from these three tracks, the rest of the track list lean heavily either towards rock and roll, towards thrash, or towards crust. On the crust side of things, you have Sum of All Vices and Human Beast, like I said, but then you have Narcissistic Breed with its blackened crust influences, with its delicately melodic and highly moody chorus. Then you have Wells of Despair, in which Wolfbrigade go fucking hard. Like, they didn't have to go that hard, but they do. And then you have the closing track, Hunt the Hunter, in which the band decides to slow things down just a little bit, just enough to bring you a heavier, much more crushing experience to round things out. On the more rock and roll side of things, you have Doomsday Dominion with its punkier grooves, its more urgent pace, and its undulating, highly melodic hook. Then you have the aforementioned The Wolfman, and then you have the Barrel of Fun, that is Hammer to the Skull, which opens up with the lyrics, "Life is short, life is dull, life is a hammer to the skull," in which I believe Wolfbrigade were channeling the spirit of the great Lemmy Kilmister. And on the thrash side of things, which appears a little bit underpopulated when compared to the rock and roll side, you have Fire Untamed, the only track on this record that carries at its very heart a very overt thrash metal influences. It is a song that riffs, rages, grooves, screams, bleeds, and leads. Now, while it is entirely possible to break the album down in the way that I just did and separate tracks into different camps, Wolfbrigade do not fall into the trap of grouping these tracks too closely together in the track list. In fact, I would say The Enemy Reality is quite good in terms of its album flow, in terms of keeping things interesting and dynamic, no matter how similar the influences in each of these separate songs might be. Perhaps the best way to demonstrate this point comes right after the midpoint of the album, with the track Nightmare of Wolves bringing to you a punkier, more rock and roll adjacent, heavy metal like textures, bringing the pace down to a mid pace. But that is only to lull you into a false sense of security, because the slowing down of the album only serves to further accentuate the impact that the next track, Doomsday Dominion, has when it kicks off and kicks your fucking face in with its sheer sense of immediacy. Much to the band's credit, even though this thing is comprised of 10 tracks at 27 minutes, at no point do Wolfbrigade seem like they're struggling to keep the energy levels up. In fact, The Enemy Reality is a highly energetic album that charges forward like a drunk Barry Allen trying to create another Flashpoint paradox because he misses his mom or some shit like,
"Remember when you were making out with your first girlfriend? And you came right as she touched your leg? It was me."
Yeah, let's not go there. Finally, contributing greatly to the strength of The Enemy Reality is the songwriting, which remains tight, skillful, and focused throughout, allowing Wolfbrigade to transition seamlessly between the different genres that they might want to bring into any particular song without any of it seeming sloppy, abrupt, or out of place. I know that the tracks on this album never quite even reach the 4-minute mark, but to not have such short tracks be sloppy because they are so short is fucking refreshing. On the production side of things, The Enemy Reality is definitely a step up from Run with the Hunted, which was way too brick-walled for its own good, resulting in an ugly sound, and I'm not talking like cute ugly in the way you would expect. The Enemy Reality does share some of that heavy brick-walling. The bass is a little bit swallowed up by the heavily down-tuned guitars, but overall the mix is a lot more dynamic. It has much more breathing room, and although the sound is not as heavy, I don't think it needed to be for what the band was trying to do. As for the age-old question of who I would recommend this to, well, if you're into crust, especially its many different permutations, all these little micro subgenres, I think you're gonna get a real kick out of this one. If you like hardcore punk, if you like your punk a little bit more on the hardcore and crust side, and especially if you like your hardcore punk cut with amounts of thrash and rock and roll, you should definitely check this album out. For the more strictly metal people out there, I would say that although the punkier parts of this album may rub you slightly the wrong way, that aspect of it is mitigated greatly by the fact that this is not only hard as fuck, it is uncompromising, it is fast-paced, it is wonderfully fun, and it has riffs aplenty. So, I think I could have just said if you are into heavy music, you should just check this one out, but As always, there'll be a Bandcamp link in the description down below, so why don't you go click that, go listen to it, please consider supporting the artist, and then come back and tell me what you thought about it. If you're a Wolfbrigade fan and if this album made or broke you, why don't you visit me in the comments down below and tell me all about your harrowing experiences listening to it. If you like my content, please like, comment, and subscribe as it always helps, and as always, it's Eason. Peace out. Once a friend of mine and I were having a discussion about the character of Hush in Batman, about the dark reflection of superheroes, and I mentioned Reverse Flash to him, and the first thing he asked was, Reverse Flash? What the fuck does he do? Go really slow?